Marky Mark's Woodshop 101.
Oh, hi. We have a little update on our barn doors. We're working on the second one.
Hi, I'm Amber.
And I'm Mark. And this is the Woodshop where it all happens. Panel on the second barn door, the first panel. That may be easier said than done. It usually takes a little persuasion because it's tight. And may have to clean out the channels here and there. Actually, you might have some glue. Well, that's a good start. Clean up this channel. There's some wood sticking up here. Okay, let's try this again. I'm just putting some boards underneath of it to support the metal a little better. And I'll probably have to use a pipe clamp to persuade it a little better. Let's see if I can tap it in first. Need a better persuader. Yeah, the clamps are going to be much better.
Troubleshooting.
Fashioned a little press here to help persuade it in. There's a lot of friction going in. It made it almost halfway on its own without too much persuasion, but due to all the irregularities, It needs a little persuasion. There we go. It's going in pretty easy, just a little bit hard for doing it by hand, but pretty easy for the clamps. Well, of course, no barn's going to have barn doors like this, since these are specifically for somebody's interior. However, barn doors originally were probably, the ones I've seen were board and batten, which is where they just lay down a bunch of boards to fill whatever hole they want to fill, and then a couple of rails, which could be, depending on how big they are, at the bottom, top, maybe in the middle, and they'll have a diagonal board meeting the rails in a Z shape, and then they just nail them in place and instant door. You know, the barns are very utilitarian, so it's not like anybody would go through this much trouble in 1820 to build a barn door. Talking about the typical barn, and I've seen American barns, German barns, English barns, Irish barns, and some other European barns, Dutch barns. They're constructed in quick fashion. You know, most of the...
So they can be quickly utilized on their homesteads, right?
Yeah, they didn't want to spend all winter building a barn.
Well, that's why they had barn raising, so that you have your community get involved.
Well, there you go. It was obviously community oriented. And I've actually seen colonial barns in various stages of construction. In St. Mary's County, the original seat for Maryland was St. Mary's City. In the early 1600s, Maryland was settled in 1632, and I think St. Mary's City came about in 1634. I could be wrong about that. But you're talking about very early colonial construction, and they would build the frames, which are called freds, and stand them up, and then it's very similar to the post and beam construction. You got posts, yeah, and it's a complete square frame, not just two posts sticking out of the ground. Those are freds. Fred. So, let me take some slack out of my clamp. They were overbuilt just by sheer mass of the wood they used.
Well, would you say they were overbuilt, or were they built to last?
Yes, I was leading into that. Because I've seen barns that old that are still around because of the sheer mass that they used with their building techniques, which is quite common. If you go back even further with construction in general, you know, they didn't have modern techniques, so they overbuilt. You know, if you're going to build a stone wall for a castle 50 feet high, how do you do that? Well, you start at the base 15 feet wide. You just make up for your lack of knowledge with sheer mass. You know, now we can build with wood typically up 5 stories is the limit, with 2x4s, which are, relatively speaking, toothpicks. So we've learned how to do it more economically. Well, I doubt that building it to last was foremost in their mind. Again, you know, you're talking about people that, you know, they just landed, they got a box of tools, and they need shelter. So they probably, you know, were more interested in getting something up quickly than having it built to last. However, on the East Coast, as dumb luck would have it, there just happens to be a lot of oak and, at the time, chestnut, which, as it dried, will last forever. We use white pine on hormones that won't last our lifetime. Switching clamps, because this one is now too long. came up to the union on the clamp, and the one part of the clamp won't slide past this being the union. So this one's will probably get me the rest of the way. I'm assuming I'm building this in the wet season, so the wood's swelled. I need to get a humidity gauge in the shop just for that purpose, so I know what's going on with the humidity and get better attuned with that in this region. Back in Maryland, I knew what was going on with that, and there was a wide swing with humidity between the seasons. Starting from the get-go, you know, depending on where the wood comes from, if it's been freshly milled, it needs to be dried and sit outside. The moisture content is what it's all about. And you want the moisture content. I've seen people say anywhere from 5 to 6% to 15 to 17% of the wood. And I used to have a meter that would measure the moisture content of wood. However, a couple of percent one way or another I've found doesn't make a bit of difference. But in between seasons, I'll use Maryland as an example, the humidity could go from 90% to, I've seen it as low as 25% inside my house there. And it was a knotty pine construction on the inside, so the boards would shrink terribly in wintertime. So I know they built that house in summertime because everything fit in summertime. So one of the things you want to do, again, depending on where you get your wood, if it's stored outside, the humidity is probably greater than if it's stored inside. So if you're going into your shop that basically is not climate controlled 24/7, you're going to have a humidity very similar to the outside. So if I buy a board that's been sitting on a shelf indoors in climate control in a store, it's probably not as humid there. So what I want to do is set the boards and just leave them alone for a week or two to let them become acclimated to the humidity content of their new environment. That's wood in general, if you're going to work with it. Because the last thing you want it to do is move while you're in the middle of making something. So I rearranged the shop again, a little bit more fine-tuning and tweaking. There was a shelving unit here, which you've probably seen in many of the other videos. It was sticking out about 2 feet and was constantly in the way, but it served a purpose. So what I did was I put up shelving here, and there's another shelf below, which of course is probably hard to see because of the machines. I had to rearrange the shop for the door job. This is the lathe. It was sitting against the garage door where the barn door is at. And there's another shelf here which is perfect for Amber's wood shorts, and I increased my storage probably about 50% actually by not using the shelving, because I've got a place for my sanders, and I stuck the spindle sander up there temporarily just to get it out of the way. And I'm completely empty from here over, So I increased my storage by doing that, and of course it doesn't change the footprint of the shop. So that's a good thing. Well, we're almost there. Kind of tedious, but oh well. Back and forth here to keep going in straight. Back here. Well, it's almost time to take the clamps off across the center cross buck, but I think I can get just a little bit closer first. Obviously the panel's got to slide in there. You can see the channel cut for it, and the clamps are obviously going to be in the way. So another inch or so, or whenever this stops, like right now. We'll have to see about that. I can still get closer. Let me take those off the last minute. Well, in this case, I'm going to put the panel in. I've got this end where I can work with nicely here. So I'll just complete this end and then turn it around and switch, because having the bench, this bench underneath of it is awfully nice. The other bench is not quite as convenient to work with. So I need to take that clamp off over there.
This one?
Yep. Yep, just pull that, let the board fall. Good. A little bit closer still before I have to take the clamps off totally. Probably tap it in. Probably need to secure this a little bit better to the bench. It's going. I want to mark an inch so I know how far in it goes. That way I'll know I have it in the proper depth, which would be 1 inch. Come on. And check, make sure nothing underneath is binding. Looks good. It's going to be tight from here out. So this is the top rail. It's time to fit that on. I got to do a couple of things before it actually goes on. I got to cut these. They'll act as tenons sliding into the stiles and the rails. And it looks like it's a little bit wide, so I have to cut that. First of all, the framing got slightly out of parallel, so I got to square that away too. So there's a few things to be done before this actually slides on. Okay, so this is the top rail. I need to cut down to 55.5 inches. It's at 60 at the moment. So I'm going to take a little bit off each side. That way I've got a nice flat side, which I'm close to, but this will is an opportunity to redo that. Sliding unit, and 55.5 inches is right there. Gee, all I need is a pencil. Hand me a pencil, love. Thank you. 55.5.
And sorry about that. I don't know if the video taped it or not, but we lost our battery.
So there we go. I'm going to clamp the rail to the fence. That way I know it's flat against it, it'll be square, which is important. The slightest out of square on something this big will show up easily. So, last cut. And of course, since I haven't had a chance to tweak the table saw yet, I'm short, oh God, probably just a 32nd of height in my saw blade, which I need for this cut, so I got to finish it by hand. It's just a little bit, only takes a second. There we go. Other side. Okay, so I need this. Of course, I need the whole ensemble to come to me about 5 to 6 inches. Well, fortunately I'm on rollers now. And I just lost my supports over here. Okie dokie. There we go. That is why I was not worried about the bowing as we were building it, so I knew how I'd get it in. Perfect. Now we have to slide it on. Probably going to need a third clamp over here. Push your red piece forward. Very good. Get some pressure on it. Okay. Good. Excellent.
Who needs video games when you can play with your friends?
Yeah.